Fashamaniacs.
Geo Gearheads.
Hey, welcome to Geo Gearheads. This is episode 492. Daryl, if I do my math right, that means we're like 8 episodes away from number 500. 500.
500 shows, but that's not even 10 years yet.
Oh, okay. Well, never
that
mind.
keeps throwing me for a loop because I'd be like 500. Wait a minute, that's not just a big deal. That's not even 10 years. Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Okay, so we're gonna do 520 as the big celebration.
Yeah, I think we're gonna blow
really
something
been
up.
Doing this for 10 years.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Man, I must have been
But
just
it's not
a
10 years
child
yet.
when this started.
Well, relatively, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, tonight we are talking about boating and specifically boating safety. With our good friend. There he is. GSM times 2. GSM times 2. Thank you for joining us. And you are quite the boating expert. You're the most boatiest man I know.
Well, I guess I float around here and there. Yes. So yeah, I had an interesting background. Started out as an ocean lifeguard in college, and then the last 3 years of that, 8 years I was a lifeguard. The last 3 of that, I was on the rescue boats as a deckhand, and that gave me enough background and experience when I had a position come in open up at Ventura Harbor for a harbor patrol officer. I was able to get that job and was a harbor patrol officer since much longer than 10 years. From 1979 to 2006, I was actually in the uniform performing law enforcement and rescue. And then I got out of the uniform, became harbor master somewhere along the line, and finished off my career and retired a few years ago.
Impressive. So you went from Baywatch to harbor master.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, when you say you were an ocean lifeguard, that's the only thing anybody ever thinks of.
Absolutely. Yep. Baywatch and trying to remember the guy who was the harbor master in a movie that I saw. It was hilarious. But yeah, and all that is so realistic. That is exactly, we had scarab boats to chase people with, and yeah, it's just, fantastic.
Yeah. I know how realistic it is. Yeah.
It is very realistic.
My father was a lifeguard down in Huntington Beach.
Oh, was he?
Many years ago. So
I might have known him.
He tells such good stories. He loved it.
It's a great job. It's a perfect job for a college student because you go to school during the year and then during the summer, that you have a pretty well-paying job. Maybe
most of the summers. This summer might have been different. This past summer.
Yeah, I've been out of boating safety. I've been off the beach for a while, so I don't know what they did. But
and then just to finish the thought, my son was a lifeguard for a couple of years.
Nice.
He was laid off in March when the pools aren't even open, but that's when COVID hit March of last year, and so he's then switched careers. He really enjoyed it, and I'm thinking he's actually saved a couple of lives, right? And they're still paying him minimum wage. Isn't that wrong?
We didn't make minimum. We made more than minimum wage, but we weren't pool lifeguards either. So,
right.
Yeah. But
anyway,
there's really no difference. It's watch the water, watch the people, and watch for signs of panic and people throwing sand. Okay, maybe not throwing sand, but
no running.
No running. Yes.
They probably have bigger problems if they're throwing sand at the pool.
Yeah, they usually do.
Oh, okay. So enough about me. Sarah, let's talk
Exactly.
about you.
Oh,
wait.
that doesn't sound like a good plan.
Okay.
Why don't we actually talk about boats?
That'd be a good idea.
Well,
Okay.
summer's
So,
coming up. People are going to want to get on the water. It's already warm enough out here to get on the water. I don't know about Michigan. Is it warm enough?
Michigan,
here, Carol?
the lakes have dried up. It's that hot and
Okay.
humid. So there is no more water in any of the Great Lakes. It's all in the air.
and it's good timing because Memorial Day is kind of the unofficial start of boating season, running through Labor Day. So yeah, this is good timing for us to come in here and chit chat.
Freiling wants to know if the water is it might be warm enough to get on the water, but is the warm enough if you fall in? And again, that depends on where you are.
That depends, right? If it's the Pacific Ocean here, I mean, typically we range between 53 and 57 degrees year round. It's cold water up here in the ocean. Now lakes and rivers, that all depends on, rivers, depending where they get their source. If it's glacier melt, it's not going to be warm. But, there's some lakes that could be quite warm actually, if they're, man-made, shallow lakes.
Yeah, I have no idea what the Great Lakes are like this year, but I know that there's been a few years where it's like, I want to say low 40s in some of the beaches around here, because it's that cold, icy water coming in from Lake Superior. So if you're in the Great Lakes, maybe not so much.
And your lakes actually freeze. The ocean
the
never
lakes,
froze.
Yeah, the lakes don't tend, around here, the lakes don't tend to freeze so much. Up north, yeah, much more so. But yeah, you'll get ice on the lakes. The Great Lakes. The lakes themselves, like the inland lakes, those are quite frequently walkable in the winter. And we have several caches that you can only get to in the winter because you can't boat to them during the year. Boating is not permitted in those lakes.
Really?
But walking on frozen water is. That's
right. It's
walking on water.
It's about what's in the lakes, I think. At least one of them that I know of, it's not deep enough to really boat in, and it's like quicksand. If you actually step in it, it's that yucky mud. So you can't walk to it, and they won't let you boat to it.
all right.
And yet caches were hidden there.
Yep.
Of course.
Because, a month or two out of the year, you can actually get there. So why would you not hide a cache there?
Oh.
So winter friendly takes on a new meaning, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it does. Yeah, there's a few of those that are specifically placed out here for ice walk caching.
Ice walk caching. Interesting. Okay, let's get back to water instead of ice.
And boats.
And boats.
So,
okay.
I live in Washington State. If I get a boat, even if I rent a boat, what do I need? Do I need any special certification, training to use a boat in Washington State?
Interesting enough, and of course I had to go in and look up the laws of both Michigan and Washington, and both of them do require a boating education card or boating safety certificate. It's kind of a recent development in the time that I was doing rescue boating, and it's interesting because they're similar and so different. Like in Washington, if you were born after 1955, you need to get your boating education card. In Michigan, only those people who were born after 1996 have to get those certificates.
Because it's obvious to those older people, you don't do stupid things out on the water.
Exactly. Well, I will say, and just like in automobiles, younger people tend to be a little more reckless and a little less experienced. So, so it didn't make as boating education, mandatory boating education was coming into different states. It did make sense that they, implemented into by age into sections. I'm imagining that Michigan either got in late or got done early and just said, okay, we're going to stop, and it's only people born in 1996. We're not going to go back any further than that. But that's just speculation on my part.
Well, and I seem to remember in the early mid 90s, there was no boater safety anything officially. You had
Yeah.
to register the boat, and that was about it. But I seem to remember something like you had to be a registered driver,
Hmm.
or they did have like commercial boaters licenses, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, for hire, there's if you're doing for hire, there's always been Coast Guard regulations.
Yeah,
But
and that's a lot different.
it is, and I think the reason it's nice that you brought this up is boating law does differ so much from state to state to state. So it's very important that people go and look up their own regulations, look up their own requirements, especially when you're looking at things like age requirements, or whether you need to wear a life jacket and things like, and those are probably the two biggest where there's a lot of differences. Um, and I don't, boy, I do not want to sit here and teach law. What I'd like to do is go ahead and and talk about how to be safer on the water, how to um, you know how not to become a statistic.
Ooh.
And so we're going to go down and going to talk about being safe on the water. And one of the keys to be safe on the water is to boat with other people who are safe on the water. It's kind of like hiking. If you're out hiking with people who are reckless, or you're hiking with people who are pushing themselves beyond their limits or not prepared, that's unsafe for you as well as it for them. And so, you know, surround yourself with people who have good habits, who are planners, who are willing to look and say, no, we're under these conditions, we're not going to do this. And people who are not going out to drink and boat at the same time is another big thing. Most of my experience was on the ocean and in saltwater and with power boats and larger sailboats. So what I've tried to do here is tone it down, bring in and learn as much as I can about kayaks, paddle boards, and things like that. Because Chris, you just recently got a kayak, right?
I did, yes.
And
And I
Daryl,
leaned on your expertise.
you did lean on my expertise, and I think I'll pass on some of that with this. So one of the first things you want to make sure is either file a float plan or at least let people know where you're going to go. Let your spouse know, let your neighbor know, or just write it down someplace that I'm going here. This is what I intend to do. And that way, if something happens, they have an idea of what lake to look for. Talk about what equipment that you have, and your experience. So, because that, it really makes a difference whether you were going out and you were prepared and you had the experience, and they know that you're wearing life jackets. That's helpful. Um, and then really considering the weather, and not just whether it's going to rain or not. That just means you're either going to get wet or you're not going to get wet. For boating with kayaks and stand-up paddle boards and manual canoes, the things that people use, geocaching. What's really important is wind and temperature, because wind is a killer. When you're paddling, that nice tailwind, and you're like, oh man, this is fantastic. I'm really moving along. I'm going to get to those geocaches really quick. When you turn around and go back, that could be very difficult. So, my recommendation would be, if you're going to go out, paddle into the wind and then let the wind assist you when you're more tired and when you're coming back. And the biggest fatalities we had in Ventura were caused during Santa Ana winds, those offshore winds that would blow people not onto the shore, they'd blow off to the shore. And, we had some serious issues where people, their boat would break down, or we had a case where there were outrigger canoes who flooded their boat and got blown 8 miles offshore. And several people died just from exposure. Several people died because they tried to swim to shore and weren't capable of doing that. So that's my biggest weather advice: is watch for the wind, be aware of the wind.
Really good to know. Because you're right. You could jump out there and go, this is easy. And, suddenly you're not going in the direction you want to go, and you may not have a plan to get back.
Yeah.
So,
and Daryl, with your inflatable, that's even all the more important. If you ever get that out of the box and you ever get on the water, that light inflatable is really subject to wind.
Yeah, there's no weight on those things to help you with much of anything.
No,
they're gonna flip every which way. They're gonna blow in the wind. It's kind of like I figure one of those old floatables that you used to take in the pool. The big giant things. Once
the
it
air
gets
mattress,
airborne, it just
the air
goes
sail
like a kite. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those blow around on the beaches in the Great Lakes. It's funny to watch, but
yeah, it's funny to watch, but it's hard. They're just, you would just watch the bow, and they're not tracking a straight line. They're back and forth, back and forth. Chris, you're going to probably experience that with that one that you have. It has, it's rounded at the bottom, which means that it's going to be less stable, and it's also not going to track like one that is V'd at the bottom. So and so I guess that gets us into personal flotation devices, PFDs.
There are so many, and that's the reason I reached out to you. Is like, I started looking online and like, holy cow, the big orange foam life vests, you can still get them, but they've changed a lot from that. And what should you look for nowadays?
Well, yeah. Let me just explain real quickly. There's 4 types of life jackets. There's type 1. Those are the ocean ones. Those are the big bulky ones. Those are the ones that if you're on a cruise ship, they're huge, and obviously not something that you're going to want to be wearing with your kayak.
It's going to restrict your movement a bit, isn't it?
Oh my God, they're big, heavy, and bulky, and they're not comfortable. And then there's the type 2, and this just deals with how much flotation they have and how much ability they have to keep your head above water and to keep your head up. So type 1s, they do that very well. You could actually be unconscious, and they would at least be floating with your head out of the water, face up. Type 2s, a little less buoyant. Type 3s, much less buoyant. But type 3s are very comfortable. They're lightweight. And especially in what I recommended to you was to get an inflatable type 3 life jacket. You describe yours.
Mine is very light. I opted for a manual inflation, not an automatic inflation, because I figure as I'm learning this kayak, I may be dumped in the water a time or two. I don't need this to, shoot off and save my life when I'm just, up to my chest in water, when I can still stand on the ground. So, um, so I opted.
It is embarrassing to be at the launch ramp, step on your kayak, and have your inflate, go in the water. That's bad enough. That's worse.
So, well, I don't know if I stole your thunder, but there are two types. There's the automatic that when it's submerged, it fires a CO2 cartridge, inflates your what am I, bladders?
Yep.
Yeah, on that very quickly, and you're floating, right? Or the manual one, which you see all the time on airplanes, right? You pull the life vest, and once you get out of the plane, you pull this cord to inflate your life vest. That's a manual inflation, and that's what I opted for.
This is starting to sound like the plot for a good movie about whitewater rafting, where someone gets like blown out as the water splashes on them and the vest inflates. They get
wearing
picked
a
up
vest,
by
and
the
you get
wind.
you get that cup of water thrown in your face. It's gonna burst on you. So it has to be submerged, and I don't know for how long, but what I looked is the recharge kits, basically a new CO2 canister, is somewhere between $20 to $30, and I was like, I don't want that for just oops, I fell over. I can stand up, I'm okay. So I figured I'm gonna do that several times before I get used to this thing. I haven't yet, though. Anyway, so
good.
mine is very light. It's kind of goes on like a vest, almost a scarf, like it just goes around your neck and down, and then straps around. And once you figure out how to put it on, it's easy and quick. And like I say, it's incredibly light and small, right? So I can set it right there on top of the kayak, and it's not taking up a lot of space.
And it's wearable. And
and it's wearable, and it's comfortable, and I can move my arms to paddle, right? Because it comes just across from around the neck down to the middle of the chest.
And I would think easier to pack too.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And being wearable, that's really what I would recommend. That you go ahead and wear it. That's why I recommended it to you, because I knew that you could now wear it. And because when you wear it, and if you fall over, it extends your ability to live, is really what it does. It when you hit the water without a life jacket, you're going to have to tread water, and treading water uses energy. And
that's not a problem. I'm a good swimmer, so I really probably don't even need this, right?
Oh man, are you going to try to piss me off?
No,
listen,
I
was a lifeguard. I worked with people who were all lifeguards, and we had life jackets. And because it doesn't matter how good of a swimmer you are, it just doesn't matter. You can't, you don't want to extend all that energy. And between the cold water, which is sapping heat out of you 12 times more than cold air will do, 12 times faster, and you're exerting energy, you're just cutting down your time. By having a life jacket on, one, you don't have to exert the energy to keep your head above water, and two, you're keeping your head above water, which helps reduce the rapid getting cold, hypothermia,
or getting oxygen. When
right.
you're underwater, there's a severe lack of oxygen.
There is, absolutely,
or at least
Chris.
Breathable oxygen.
Yeah, breathable oxygen.
There's plenty of oxygen.
There's plenty of oxygen. It's
a third of it, 2/3 of it is oxygen. You just can't get to it.
Yeah, right. Unless you have those little gills that fish have, and you don't. Okay. So, and the other thing that I would really recommend, and I don't know that I recommended this to you, but I will now, is attach yourself to the kayak. Either like the paddle boarders do, they have a little straps that they put around their ankle. Anything that you can do to keep that kayak next to you, because Daryl, especially with your inflatable. If you ever take that out, if it tips over and there's any wind at all, it will blow away faster than you can swim after it, and that's not a good situation. So
No, but I am thinking now, if I get a like long enough and strong enough rope, I can use it as a kite and go skating.
Oh yeah.
you probably could. You're going to have to learn how to use that paddle as a rudder, and then you basically do have a sail. You just have to figure out how to give direction.
New
I want
life
to see that
goals.
video.
But
Um,
yeah, but
so, yes.
get it attached. Go ahead, Chris.
GSM times 2. Should you also attach the paddle to yourself?
That probably wouldn't be too bad of an idea. The paddle's going to float, but it's not going to float with a lot of windage, and so it's not going to blow away. So it wouldn't be a bad idea, but it could cut into your maneuverability. I think that string would eventually drive you crazy. Okay. So I guess those are those are the most important things that I can think of is wear the life jacket, have it wearable. It's not going to do you any good if it's strapped on your kayak and you fall over and the kayak blows
but it's
away.
right there. I mean, I can get to it if I need it.
It was right there. It was readily accessible until the boat and you became separated and the windage of your light kayak carried the boat faster away than you can swim. Which doesn't take much wind to do, actually. So, yeah.
Such good. Thank you.
Let's see.
Okay, so
paddleboards.
Oh, see, there you don't need anything, right? That's just like swimming. You're going to use them near the shore. They're fine.
It's really interesting because it took a long time for the Coast Guard to decide what are these. The Coast Guard definition of a vessel is anything that can create transportation across water.
Okay.
With that definition, your floaty toy could be called a vessel. A mat could be called a vessel. The little mat that you lay on in the pool could be called a vessel if you took it out of the water. So they had to figure out, okay, what is an aquatic toy and what is a vessel? And paddleboards, it was very difficult to decide what that was. But they have decided that is in fact a vessel, and it's required to have all the equipment that a vessel is required to have. Except in one exception. If it's being used as a surfboard, then it's not required. So
really?
Yeah.
So a surfboard is not an aquatic vessel.
A surfboard is not a vessel. It's an aquatic toy. It's an aquatic toy. And a paddleboard that's strictly being used for surfing falls under that category. But otherwise, it does. It still needs the life jackets. It's still you need to have a sound producing device. And there's another thing to make sure that people understand is get a sound producing device. It could be just a whistle, a good whistle. Get one that the umpires use or referees use. They're good whistles, or the little air horns. Not sure how good the air horns work wet. So
underwater.
Yeah, underwater.
Well, that's probably true of the whistle too. It's not going to whistle very well underwater.
I don't think so. Well, they say that sound travels more underwater, but maybe not whistles. I don't know.
Well, yes, but the problem is that
for another
it requires the air.
Right. So you do have to have that. You don't have to. They actually do have to have navigation lights if they operate at night. They don't need to have visual distress. They don't need to have flares or visual distress unless they're used unless they're used on coastal waters. And then on coastal waters, you have to have them. So, yeah.
So you have to have a flare on a stand-up paddleboard if you're right off the shore?
Well, not necessarily a flare, but some kind of visual distress, and they could be flags. We think of
Gotcha.
flares, but there's other options for visual distress signals. Yeah.
Never thought of that.
Yeah, actually, until I was reviewing for this, it's actually kind of funny. If I told my wife, "Yeah, I'm going to be I'm a guest on a podcast talking about boating safety," and her response was, "Do you still know boating safety?"
Oh,
And she said, "And did you hone up on it a little bit?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do, but yes, I did." So, yeah, and I guess that's one of the key messages is state by state, even locality by locality, the laws are different. So,
Mhm.
in Michigan, as I looked at Michigan law and I looked at Washington law, there are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences, and it goes beyond who needs the license. It goes age requirements, who can operate a PWC. So know your local laws and know your state laws, and then many jurisdictions have separate laws. For example, you know there might be a jurisdiction in Michigan where last year they had, 8 boating accidents where duck hunters fell out of their boats, and 4 of those duck hunters died. They might actually require everybody to wear a life jacket if you're duck hunting, just based on local incidents. This is all made up, by the way, so don't
Oh,
start
good.
looking. Yeah,
Well, I was going to say a lot of the park systems out here will have different requirements than other parks will, let alone the
yes,
state itself. So
yeah,
you do have to kind of pay attention if you're going in one of those kind of park services to make sure that, your boat is allowed and that you have everything that they need for that. A lot of times in the parks, you have to pay a separate permit fee for your watercraft.
yep, yeah. I was looking at the Michigan stats. I can't find them right now in my notes, but I got them memorized. 80% of the boating fatalities in 2020 in Michigan were drownings, and 80% of the people who drowned were not wearing life jackets. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, there were only in 2020 there were only 20 deaths, 20 boating deaths in Michigan, but that could have been 80% 4. Could have been 4.
Well, and it's also important on that note to know how to wear your flotation device, because there are people who drowned because they're not wearing that correctly.
Yeah, they're sized. They're sized for adults. They're sized for children, sized for teenagers. Yeah, and that's based usually on chest width or age. But yeah, it's important to have one that fits. If you put your adult on a child and they fall in the water, that's just going to float up to the top, and that's not going to keep their head above water.
No, and
It's
then they struggle to try to get out of it and will drown in the process.
panic. Panic is a real thing. As I was lifeguarding, one of the people who I saved was a kid who panicked. He was on a little flotation device, not much wind. It flipped over, and he started to swim towards his flotation device, towards his little mat. And he would have made it with 3 more strokes, but he panicked. And suddenly, he's not going to do anything except drown. Take no positive action is the definition of panic.
Yeah.
So let's see. Is there any questions come up in the chat? The chat's been about as quiet as can be.
It's because you're not in there.
Oh, that's it.
We do have some humor being thrown about, including using a fire extinguisher. And then Brylang wants to know if a fire extinguisher can be used as an emergency outboard engine.
That's a good question.
Yep. Brylang, you do it and take a video and we'll watch.
Well, the one that I found amusing was Bob says that while kayaking, I once used an umbrella as a sail, went a quarter mile without a single paddle stroke.
Perfect.
I like that one.
That's a good idea. Except he's probably now. Well, if he's going back to where he launched, that's a great idea. If he's going the other direction and just starting out, probably not that good of an idea. Based on
Yeah,
the
when we were
suggestion to keep
canoeing,
the wind behind you as you, or if you keep paddle into the wind as you
Sure.
go out.
Mhm.
when we were canoeing in college, it was always the rule, head upstream on your out trip and then downstream coming back.
Excellent advice.
Very, very helpful when you accidentally dump the entire crew out of the boat.
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh, and Daryl, do you have a story about that?
Not what I'm going to share here. The worst part is it was while we were portaging the canoe.
Oh,
I don't remember who it was, but someone got stung.
oh. Yeah.
Well,
The bees
When I
did
was-
not like us being there.
when I was young and foolish, thought I was indestructible, I went whitewater rafting with some friends. Took my wife, and it was fun. And we're out in the raft, and our guide there tells us he was out partying all last night. His name was Tony. He had T-O on one knee and N-Y on the other. I'll never forget Tony. Anyway, and we're going along, and they come up what they call house rock because it's as big as a house, and he led us right into it. And we went up. I went in the water, and I watched a video of it afterwards. I timed it. I was in the water exactly 1 minute,
Ooh.
but in white water, up and down, and it felt like so much longer. And it was like I was exhausted after that 1 minute. So I know personal flotation is real and it's needed. I had one of those big, heavy, I assume type 1. I didn't know there were types before, right? Okay, type 1 vest, and it kept my head above water for the most part. It tried, right? The water is quite strong, but yeah, my wife got dumped out as well, and well, she's still my wife, so I guess she forgave me.
I hope Tony gave you good advice on what to do when you fell into the water to keep your feet
down.
forward.
Yep,
Yeah.
keep your feet downstream. Yep.
Good.
And you're thinking that, right? And it's hard to do. Like, yeah, I gotta keep my feet in front of me because I don't want to go head first into a rock.
Yeah.
And there were, I don't know, 3 or 4 rafts lined up down the river. I'm convinced he dumped us on purpose. But
it actually sounds like he might have.
Yeah. The rafts were there to pull us up and out. And they're like, okay, we've all got you in here. Do you want to get back in your own raft, or do you want to continue with us? I want my own raft again. I'm not going to let this happen. I'm going to push Tony out this time. But that was it. That was the worst of it. And the rest of it was actually just a very pleasant day.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my story.
Well, good. That's a good story, and I'm glad that he gave you good instruction on what to do to float downstream and keep yourself from knocking yourself out. But there's lots of rocks and twigs and things trying to grab those ankles and turn you the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Getting
Good.
back to the chat, Bryling also had an interesting note that in British Columbia, removing all remnants of aquatic plants and draining and drying are required by law. You are required to stop at an inspection station if carrying a boat on your vehicle.
Yeah,
Interesting.
because of invasive aquatic plants.
Right.
In California, there's many lakes, the Lake Casitas, which is right near us. For a number of years, if your boat wasn't stored there, you couldn't bring your boat there. Finally, they were able to come up with some protocols that would allow you to bring a boat from someplace else and put it in that lake, because it's a lake that's used for water, for it's a source of
Mhm.
drinking water. And their pumps, if you were to get some of these mussels, and they would just destroy it. And I think, Cadero, you've Lake Michigan, and Michigan has had quite a number of issues with invasive plants or invasive animals. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
It's yeah, especially in like the Chicago area. I know they've had problems with it, and they're trying to keep the invasive species from one waterway from entering another.
yep, yeah. And especially not just the plants, but also, and it's probably related to this for
Yeah,
what
the
Brylan said,
mussels. There's some fish that are the same problem.
right?
Yeah.
Yep. So
MC3
yeah,
Cats also says that make sure your cooler is the inflatable type, or is a floatable type, not inflatable.
Well,
Sorry,
yeah.
floatable.
that kind of goes back to being safe with safe people. Yeah.
Yeah.
As we were tweeting, I actually taught boating law enforcement for I guess 5 years, and yeah, talking about getting drunk boating, and teaching boating safety, teaching law enforcement boating under the influence law. Pretty important out there.
Mhm.
Especially in power boats or even sailboats. You don't have the experience that you normally have in a car. Most boaters boat 4 to 8 times a year. So if you can
Mhm.
imagine getting in your car only 4 to 8 times a year, and then getting in your car intoxicated one of those times, your skills are not going to be as good as they could be.
I think
So
that's about how much I drove last year.
it could be. Okay,
Okay.
other than 2020, most of us spend more than 4 to 8 days a year driving our automobiles.
Okay, GSM times 2. One more question. What should we have to carry all of our, essentials, our wallet, our cell phone, our keys?
Oh, yeah.
What do we need to have in a kayak or a stand-up paddleboard to keep these things dry so that, if your key goes into the water, you're sunk? Well, it is. It's not going to float.
Yeah, well, as geocachers, we have those little plastic bags. Just stick it in a plastic bag.
Okay.
That'd be fine. No problem. Okay, but seriously, no. Seriously, there are pieces of equipment that are made specially for protecting your cell phones, your electronics, and so forth, and they're very good, and they're very effective on what it is they do. One thing you want to make sure you don't do is stuff so much in there that you lose the buoyancy of that item, and because then it's just going to go to the bottom. All your stuff is dry, but still not recoverable.
Unreachable.
Unreachable.
You can still see the glow on your cell phone as it goes down.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll never forget in shoot, I can't remember what the waterway is that Mackinac Island is in, but we did a geocaching event up there, and one of the people dropped their GPS as they were getting off the ferry, and it went straight to the bottom, which is supposedly, I want to say, like 15 or 20 feet deep. And it's, where the ferry's docked. So there's no retrieving it.
No.
But it was still on the next day.
Oh, the next day.
The next day.
Well, that's
It was one of those like E-Trex units, I think.
Mhm.
yeah. We had a little event where we were going. I had hidden a cache that required you to go underwater, so we all had an event, and people came with their paddle boards and their kayaks and their floaty toys, and went and recovered that. And one of them decided that he needed to have his GPS with him when he got in his kayak, and sure enough, when they got in about 5 feet of water or a little deeper, it flipped, and there it went in the water, and I'm not even sure we recovered it. Yeah, it was in deeper water. Yeah. So
Breiling, trying to go to the top of the class, goes, "Oh, I know this. It's a dry bag."
a dry bag. Thank you very much, Freiling.
And MC3 Cats says a good OtterBox for the phone. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to float. It'll keep it dry. It'll keep it, watertight, but you probably want something that's going to float.
Yeah.
Well, that's just where I was going to go, is if you are looking for a lot of kayak caching, it's a good idea to invest in one of the GPS Map 70 series, because those are built to float.
Oh.
There you go.
They are specifically for people who are on the water.
I've seen cell phone cases, I guess they're dry bags, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with like 3 zips on them, 3 zip, I can't think of the word, Ziplocs on them. You roll it over and seal it, and it's got a bladder around it to keep the whole thing floating, right? That's great for your phone. That you still got to do something for your car key, right? And why I say that is most car keys now are electric, right? Rarely do you just have an old key that you could stick in and open the door. You've got to press a button to open it, and if that thing gets wet or sits in water for a while, you're not going to be able to open your car effectively. You can pull out the key and do other things, but
well, and then a lot of the new ones are keyless. I mean, you sit in the car, you push a button, there's no key to turn into the ignition. So yeah, if that gets gone, you're pretty much walking home.
Yeah. And in fact, some of the new cars won't let you leave a key in the car and lock it. Right. So you can't go and remove that physical key just so you can unlock your car later and leave the rest of it in the car. It's not going to work. I guess if you're going with a buddy, you can swap cars, right? I'll put my key in your car. You put your key in my car.
But then how do you get okay, but then how with the new ones that do that, you can't get in your car.
Okay, so here's one of the things I've thought about with mine. And most of the keyless systems will actually let you take the key and put it somewhere in the car when the battery dies. So pull the battery out of a spare key and then put that like in the trunk. So then you can always still get in, but you have to start the car. And on my car, you actually have to hold it on the starter button as you push it. Some of the other cars actually have a slot in the center console or in the glove box where you can put the key when the battery's dead, and it's just using that NFC to power the coil to get the ID off of it. Yeah.
Boy, that's Daryl. That's why you're a gearhead. You probably actually read your owner's manual.
I did, and I asked lots and lots of questions and research because I was so scared of the keyless.
Well, and most of those key fobs do have a physical key in them.
Sure, but it doesn't help you start the car.
No, it doesn't. I mean, you've got to find the way to get it out. But yes.
Yeah, and I'm an old school manual trans guy. Just having an automatic trans scares me. If my battery's dead, I can still get my car started. Just get a running start, jump in, and pop the clutch.
MC3 Cat thinks the NFC is the National Football Conference.
Yes, they're in your car.
Yeah. Okay, so Buffalo Bob says, I have a GPSR attached to a 1-inch piece of dowel rod. It sits in a fishing rod holder while I'm yakking. If it falls in, it floats.
Ooh.
Interesting.
1 inch?
Maybe I wouldn't think that was enough. Well, I'm thinking he's talking the 1-inch gauge dowel rod, so that really, really wide dowel rod.
Could be, yep. They're true. 1 inch would fit into a fishing pole holder.
Right.
Yeah. Brylang says maybe use a magnetic key holder and put it into the rear of the car. Might be far enough away from the sensor to allow it to be locked.
Not in mine. If I have it in the trunk, it will still complain.
Yeah. Just, don't let anybody see you doing that. And magnetic key, I don't know. Some
wouldn't
of
trust
my,
a magnetic key holder underneath.
some of my remotes for my various cars are really quite thick. I don't know if they'd fit into a magnetic key holder anymore.
No, mine would not either.
Oh, Buffalo Bob says it's a 1-inch diameter, 8 inches long. Oh yeah, that's going to float.
That's quite a bit of flotation.
That's a brilliant idea.
That is a great idea.
And if you can put it in the holder just right, you can set it in there, and it's kind of like a phone holder on your car.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea.
Mhm.
We've been at this for 50 minutes already.
Because GSM times 2 is so good.
Well,
And
thank you
we
very
haven't
much.
gotten into all the rat holes that we usually get into. Or
Well, I
we
don't know
have, but they've been on topic.
Exactly. We now have life jackets for cell phones.
Yep.
That we have been covered.
Yeah.
And we
Connect-
talked about life jackets for people, life jackets,
jackets
for
for
cell
people.
phones.
Yep.
A life jacket-ish for GPSR.
Dry bags. Thank you for
Yep.
for passing that on. Yeah.
Wow,
Cool.
so much, and we probably haven't even scratched the surface of what you even had in your show notes.
That's right.
Oh no, we most of that was all law, and
Oh, got it.
I
don't like
don't
the
want
law.
to sit here and tell you what age in Michigan you have to do. A horsepower over 6 or under 6.
But that is important information that you check for your local state, wherever you are going caching, make sure that you're complying.
Yep.
GSM times 2, I know this may not be a question you can answer, but if you have to get certified for a boat, a motorboat of some sort, how long are the classes usually? Or is it a 1-day class, or is
it seems
couple
like
of
they're online. They're available online, or you can also get them in person. And I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
California was quite a bit behind. We've only had mandatory certifications for certain ages since 2018. So
Oh, wow.
I was out long before that went into place. But just looking in both Michigan and Washington, it looked like you have an online course.
There you go. Yeah, you know what? Do it, especially if you're going to rent a boat. And go out geocaching. Maybe you get a boat with a motor. You're going to go out geocaching. Who knows? Maybe you actually go fishing for a day. Nah, just go geocaching, and go get that course. It's going to help you in the long run. Who knows when you're going to have somebody like Tony dump you out of your boat?
Well, I wonder how much of that is actually transferable state to state. So if I go and visit Ohio, for instance, would they take my Michigan certification?
As far as I can tell, yes, they will. They would allow it, on a temporary visitor basis. So
typically
there
in
is
the US,
reciprocity in this.
right? Yeah, it's the full faith and credit, I think, is what they call it.
Yeah.
If it's legal in one state, you're legal when you go to the next state.
Right.
Kind
At
of
least you've done something, right?
like your driver's license. You don't have to get a new driver's license.
Or your marriage license.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because that's one of those things. Is I think it was actually tried on that. I seem to remember that something in the 90s. Someone was arguing that their marriage, someone's marriage wasn't legal in that state.
Oh wow.
But there's a bunch of that gets really, really wacky, or used to. I don't think it does so much anymore. But all the stories about how if you check into a hotel as Mr. and Mrs., then you're married. That, if I remember, was struck down again in the 90s, and that was all part of that stuff.
Some of these old laws that are still on the books are hilarious.
Yeah.
I call them hot tub rules, right? They were created because somebody did something.
In a hot tub?
Well, it could be. That's, you go into a hot tub and you go in an apartment building or a hotel. There's this huge list of rules and you're like, why would anybody say that? Well, because somebody did it once. Oh yeah, that's right.
One of the cities near me had at least until the 2000s on the books that if you were backing up your carriage man had to stand, had to walk behind it with a red lantern.
Okay.
Because that happens all the time.
Well, if you've got a carriage, you better be doing
in
it.
the 2000s.
Well, hey, there's these reenactors. They do strange things all the time.
This is true. This is true. Can't assume, I guess.
I know. GSM Times 2, thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome, and thanks for keeping all the rat holes towards the end. That was really
we tried,
because we definitely got them all in, just not during the talk about boating safety. So
we have to meet our quota for rat holes.
Mm-hmm.
You did good.
iTunes will ban us if we don't.
Gotcha.
Especially because they're not around anymore.
Okay, so this week we talked about boating. Next week we're going to talk about electric vehicles. Probably a good idea not to mix the two up. I'm just thinking out loud right now. But anyway, we're going to talk about electric vehicle caching with Retired Guy.
Wow, that was a little bit of a tongue twister.
Well, it was harder than you think it might be.
Yeah.
And I'm drinking
I kind of
water.
got that impression.
I'm podcasting safely.
All right.
It doesn't mean I do it well.
Check the Cashmaniacs website at cashmaniacs.com for more on the Geo Gearheads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads@cashmaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cashmaniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on the website to support the Cashmaniac shows. Geo Gearheads is produced by Chris Suffenauer and Daryl Wanberg. This show is copyright 2021 by Daryl Wanberg. All rights reserved.